Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I'd like to call to order the Hingham School Committee meeting of May 20th. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised by Harbor Media. If anyone else intends to audio or video record this meeting, can you please identify yourself now? All right, thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have a couple to approve tonight. 2.1, minutes of the Joint School Committee and Capital Outlay Committee held on January 23rd, 2019. Someone want to make a...
I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee jointly with the Capital Outlay Committee held on April 23rd, 2019.
January 23rd.
What did I say?
April.
Sorry.
That's okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Libby.
Good catch.
Any discussion? No? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any no? No, everybody good? All right, thank you. 2.2, to approve minutes of the Joint School Committee and Advisory Committee meeting held February 28th, 2019.
I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the Joint Hingham School Committee and Advisory Committee meeting of February 28th, 2019.
Awesome, thank you, Carrie. Second?
I'll second.
Carlos, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, any opposed? No? Great, thank you. And then minutes of the school committee meeting held May 6, 2019.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Hingham School Committee May 6, 2019 meeting.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Yes.
On that particular meeting, I made it a point to thank a number of people, not the least of whom was our friend Kay Proschman. And
Yes.
without going through that explanation again, what I'd ask is if I just simply send a synopsis of who I thanked to Carrie, excuse me, and include it in the minutes.
Sure.
I think thank yous are very important.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sure. Okay. Everyone agree? Okay.
Yeah.
So with that change to be included into the minutes, do we want to approve them pending that change? All right.
As amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. No opposed? All right. Great. Thank you. And just to note, Liza O'Reilly is not here this evening. Her daughter graduated college today, so she is rightly celebrating with her family tonight. So just wanted to point out if anyone was wondering why she's not here. All right. Item number 3, questions and comments. The Hingham School Committee encourages community engagement and welcomes questions and comments as agenda items are discussed at the meeting. We have set aside up to 15 minutes at the beginning of this meeting for comments or questions that fall under the purview of the school committee and are not already on tonight's agenda. If any guests wish to speak, please come to the microphone, state your name and address your comments to the chairperson. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker and must relate to topics within the scope of the responsibility of the school committee. There's a lot more of this disclaimer to read, but if anyone is here too with any comments or questions and want to bring them up, I'll read the rest of it. But all right, seeing none, we'll move on. Oh,
If I have a comment on the budget process, would I give that now or would I give that during that discussion?
during that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so seeing none, we will move on to item number 4, Superintendent's report. Good news first.
There is an email in your packet that came from Libby Cates and making us aware of a pretty impressive event, and that is that she raced a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago now probably, in a half Ironman distance triathlon, where the swim portion was 1.2 miles, the bicycle portion 56 miles, and the run 13.1 miles. And overall, she placed high enough to earn a qualifying spot on the Ironman 70.3 World Championships, which are to be held in September in Nice. She doesn't mention whether she's going to be going to Nice or not, or would like to go to Nice, or is fundraising to go to Nice. I don't know that, but she wanted to let us know that she was proud of how she had done, and certainly we are equally proud of such an accomplishment. I would have trouble making that in a bicycle, certainly, but even in my car to drive 56 miles and 13.1, especially right now. So Congratulations to Libby, and for those who don't know, Libby Cates is a member of the science department at the high school. Last Friday's fire, certainly when I wrote this yesterday, things evolved a little differently from what we had planned. We had a large group of staff members from the high school who were here yesterday morning for a rather lengthy meeting, and some of the same people were here all day Friday and so on. And we thought we made a lot of progress yesterday morning and did a lot of planning, but nothing ever goes exactly according to plan. So this morning, we had a late start for students, as we do many times on a release kind of day. So we ran this like a release day, but there was a little glitch in our not being aware, meaning the school department, the high school, nobody being aware that the gas had been shut off on Friday. And so there was a delay as we had to get National Grid on site. Not the easiest task, I don't mind using their name, because they've been used other times with criticism of the immediacy of service. But in any event, we had to wait to be approved to go into the building. So students remained outside until approximately 11, from 10 till 11. But again, a lot of people were there very early, doing all kinds of things to get make up for the fact that we had 13 or 16 or some number of classrooms like that we had to relocate the nurse's office. That happened yesterday with people hanging around and getting everything that needed to be there, and make whatever plans we had for the number of classrooms that would be out for some undetermined period of time. The good news of the day was that the auditorium was open, and on Friday and Saturday we didn't think that would be the case, and given the number of things we have coming up, such as junior awards, senior awards, graduation, and many other things happening in the auditorium, that was good news. So we're functioning. The seniors are essentially out in regular classes, and they will have their field day here on Wednesday, which of course conflicts with something that's here. But nevertheless, making good progress, and really thanks to a lot of people who volunteered their time and did it with good spirit and made us be where we are. We wouldn't be without all of that extra help. So thanks to all who contributed to that effort. And thanks also to all the folks who didn't call me today when things didn't go exactly as they were to be planned. I appreciate that as well, but certainly, flexibility and collaboration and patience and all of that are the order of the day. And I struggled to maintain that over the last week, so I can only imagine that parents were as upset as I was and have been. But we're making progress, good progress, and we were very fortunate that the fire didn't cause structural damage. Water and smoke damage is difficult to clean up, but there was not structural damage, and that's going to save the day in the end. So I think that's probably enough to say about that.
No? Okay, thank you.
Yes. The financial summary that we get after every South Shore education, the collaborative that's up in the industrial park, after every one of those meetings, and our last one was on April 26th, there's another one this Friday, we get, and every district that's a collaborative member gets a 3 or 4 page financial summary about where they are with respect to the budget, and also where they are with respect to enrollment, and the two are obviously very much linked together. And our practice has been to give that little update that's prepared, particularly for the 11 school committees, to them, give that information to the special ed subcommittee, who can discuss it at a meeting if that seems appropriate, or, as well, we give it to all of you, so all of you are aware of what's in it, and if you have questions, and there are questions that I can't answer, we can get the answers back for you. So don't hesitate to forward a question that I will get an answer for, but the special ed subcommittee may choose to discuss it further.
Okay. Right. Mhm. All right. That's it for your, is that it for your communications, Dr. Gallo?
Yes.
All right. So 5.2 is student communications. Is Emma
Is Emma here?
I don't see her. All right, so no student communications tonight. 5.3 is any other communications? Do you have any other communications, Dr. Gallo? No. No? Anyone on the committee? Nope. Okay. All right, so number 6, unfinished business. To hear an update on the fiscal year 20 operating budget. So in your packets, as Dr. Gallo mentioned in her annotated agenda, there is a budget update with the path, to steal a term from the Board of Selectmen, that Dr. Gallo and the administration is recommending to close the gap in the budget. I think, John, where were we, how big did the gap get at one point?
The gap was about $432,000.
Okay.
And it's now closed, where we show there's, I have to make one adjustment on this because I learned I had made an assumption of a position at a lower rate, so I got to increase that by a few $1,000s. But what you have in the packets actually shows that we've managed to close the budget gap and come up with a positive amount of $36,000. So every initiative that we thought was appropriate to put in the budget is in the budget, and there's a $36,000 remain or positive variance, if you would, now.
Okay. All right. Do you want to walk us through?
I think John should
Some of
walk through,
Sure.
what he's put for the budget, and then I'll make some comments
Okay.
on it.
And then folks may have questions.
And let you know before we start that, of course, this is our recommendation to you. We think it takes into account some of what we heard several weeks ago when people talked about their priorities. We know it takes into account the enrollments that we talked about 2 weeks ago
Yes.
when we went, Jamie and I went to the high school and met with the 2 secondary principals, and one by one, each of the directors and the resource teachers, to find what the real needs are. When these budget numbers were put into the budget back in November, each of the directors was guesstimating, based upon current enrollment, what students would select and what needs would be here in May. And that has happened, and we're usually pretty close, but we go through one by one. How many sections do you need now, based upon real student tallies? And we did a similar thing at the elementary level, and at that level, we met with the 4 principals, and they brought us a chart that indicated what their need is based upon current enrollment, and with including the kindergarten enrollment. And we decided together what numbers of classes we'd have, and we have pretty good class size. We did have to add the additional kindergarten for each school that we had put in the budget. We were hoping we might be able to take it out, but the numbers are in the 290-something now. But we also were able to reduce a class at another grade level in another building.
Okay. Sorry, I think, can folks hear on the,
No, not really.
folks here? It's very hard to hear. All right, so,
That's the projector.
It's the projector.
The air is not on. It's not working.
all right, sorry. It's a bigger crowd than usual, so we'll speak a little louder. And hopefully on HCAM they can hear us, so if your mics are too far away, maybe move them a little closer. Thank you. So, all right, so John, do you want to walk us through any of the, like, and maybe some of, I mean, there's some smaller items in here that were sort of, I'd say rounding errors, but there are some, so maybe sort of to hit the highlights of what we've, okay.
So the prior to, I think, April 20th, I mean, the gap was up at $432,000. And, based on that, the reason, then Dr. Gallo and Dr. LaBillois met with the staff, with the high school staff, secondary staff, middle school and high school, and also with the elementary staff, and go over all the particulars. Now we have all of the kindergarten enrollment in, we have an idea of, how many first graders we're going to have and what our elementary enrollment will be. And what they learned from that process was that we will need an additional section of kindergarten. However, through the way the actual counts come out of students, we can actually reduce a section of elementary. Okay, so that's reflected, and you can see in this tracking mechanism, I show adjustments as of the 14th because I was accumulating all these adjustments and I put them all in as of May 14th. Then they talked to the secondary group, and we determined, what we actually needed for secondary scheduling. And through that process, we actually reduced the secondary FTEs, which was a total of about 4.3, got reduced down to 2.05 secondary FTEs. And this chart actually shows sort of a tracking of those reductions and where they would potentially be, but it's not a certain, it doesn't absolutely mean that, foreign language won't get a 0.2, or that math is going to, or that science is going to go down, 0.8. Some of the actual implementing of the FTEs may require the FTE to go to a different subject matter, if you would, but it'll be offset in another place. What we know is that the 2.05 is sufficient type FTEs. So that's a significant drop that you see, okay, because that's really 2.25 FTEs. So when you see the tracking saying that, English is going down 0.25, that's from the original base. In the original base, we had those 4.3 there. So what this tracking mechanism shows is, where those reductions would be. One example would be we had science and we had STEM. We had science at a 1.0 and STEM at a 1.0. Well, STEM has been reduced completely to 1.0, and we determined that what we really need from science is a 0.8. Okay? And that need of the FTEs is actually a combination of needs at the high school and possible reductions for this year only at the middle school. Of 0.2 actually from the middle school. There's the budget sort of plans for a 0.6 coming from the middle school, 0.2 in like 3 sections. That's where we get into, this is sort of directionally correct, but we don't know exactly where all those FTEs will be, but we know that we'll be able to manage it with the total of 2.05 secondary FTEs.
What I said in the note is what we've got here is a path to closing the gap more than but when some of that involves hiring pieces of people, and when we go out to post, which we're in the process of doing now, it may turn out that we can't get someone to teach course X at 0.4. So we have to put together a different combination so that we can be sure that we can realize anything we say. But we have a path. We've met a lot of the needs, but if we brought it down to 2 point something, it's not because we don't have the students, it's because we had to make real reductions. And I say reductions, not cuts, because these are not cuts of things we already have. These are reductions of some of the requests that came to us. But it's a path, a direction we can go. One we've talked about is cutting the secondary FTEs, honestly, because we had to reduce people that were requested in order to get to a number as big as
The 432.
the 432 that our gap had grown to. Our gap was smaller to begin with, but we had some unanticipated vocational students who applied late, were accepted by the school, and now we have to meet those. And that's what caused the gap to grow almost $100,000.
Yeah, that was a significant bump up during the process, though. I think we told you about that several meetings ago, though. We had, 3 additional students accepted at the South Shore Votech, and another one accepted at the North Fork Aggie, and actually even another one came to North Fork Aggie. So But we've been able to reconcile and, adjust and make sure that we have all those tuitions accounted for. So VOTEC, we show a reconciliation of about $10,000 in this reduction. That is for all the known tuitions that we have for all the accepted students. While we did get a new application in May 10th, it's very unlikely that a May 10th application is going to have an acceptance. And the law really allows you to say, if they come in after April 1st, that you don't have to fund it. I'm not sure where we'd go if there was an acceptance, but it's probably unlikely at this point. Okay, because,
They were, we checked on that again today, John. I should have told you, but we didn't have much get-together time today. But in any event, we checked on whether or not South Shore, which is the Vogue School, would be honoring that, because the literature says that they should have received the request at a much, much earlier date. So we called there, and they said they are considering it. I said, well, I'm considering it as well, and I don't know what our decision will be at this point. We're checking further with DESE
Okay.
on that.
That could be some exposure of some $17,000 to $18,000 if there were another acceptance. Another big item on this sheet here has to do with the full-day kindergarten tuitions. Okay, now that we know what the full-day kindergarten tuition count is, and then also through the application of the enrollment process, we identify the exact mix of those students that will be paying full or some portion of a waived tuition. And we basically get the exact students, and you have to leave a little bit of leeway because situations could change. There could be some changes during the course of the year where students become free or at a reduced rate. However, through that, identifying the exact mix of the students based on the applications that we know will attend next year, we were able to reduce this by, I think, another $46,000. I think it was, increased the FTK offset. My thing's so small, I need my readers, excuse me. Where was that? Yeah.
It was 45,000.
45,000, yep, 45,000, so that's a big one.
Quick question, Tom.
Sure.
Listed twice, increased FDK offset.
Well, we had done that previously. Previously, we took another look at it. This was a while back, like early on when we were reducing. There's a different dates associated with those.
A suspected, but then as the enrollments came in, and many of them brought enrollments that
And
weren't inspected,
we reduced
dollars with
we
them.
increased tuitions, so that tuition increase resulted in one of those increases, Libby, okay, of the amounts we could use. And then, now that we know the full enrollment and we know we had additional kids from what we may have been projecting and where they'd fall within the tuition scale, we know that there's additional revenue that we could apply to the offset. Does that make sense?
So
the
the notes, one says mixed change plus tuition increase.
Yes.
Mixed change, what does that mean?
Well, I mean,
Sorry.
as we go forward and get data on, where the mix of the students are on the scale, okay, whether they're full pay, whether they're waivers, whether they're retentions, whether they're, IEPs, then, we get better data as we go along through the course of the year. And I use that actual mix from the previous year to sort of do a projection out, so I come up with a dollar value. Now, we've already done enrollment for the previous, for this upcoming year, and we know all of those students that will be attending, and we during that application process too, we also know about, where they will be on the tuition scale, so I can actually take those individual students and project them out to come up with what I would expect to receive in revenues over the course of the year. And then those revenues are the ones that go into the budget to offset. I'll hold out maybe $10,000 or $20,000 to make sure that we're covering any like refunds that may happen or changes in circumstances. Some people could essentially move out between now and the start of school. I mean, numbers of things like that could happen. So there's not 100%, but it's pretty, it's a level where I think we're comfortable and we have enough corpus sitting there so that we can, cover any refunds or changes that may take place during the course of the year.
We actually put an offset in the initial budget. And it is a guess, because we don't know the kids. Now, we know the offset for today, could change tomorrow. And it's a combination of things. Students, by our own policy, students who enter kindergarten with an IEP, their tuition is waived. And that goes back to the fact that many of those students would have been, under our old process, kids that got a full-day kindergarten. But they were the only ones that got paid full-day kindergarten. And also, because we use the sliding scale, there are kids whose parents qualify based upon their income. And so they can get a partial waiver according to that scale. But honestly, the total number of those students that don't pay a tuition is a fairly small number, because there are very few children who enter kindergarten with an IEP. And so that number is small, and the number of kids who qualify for a tuition waiver is, just by my having signed off on those, is 5 or 6 children. So it's not a large number of kids.
Okay, full day, okay, good, okay. So another big item on this has to do with the reducing the adjustment counselor that was requested, okay? And that reduction, we have the adjustment counselor in play this year, and we're funding it with Title I. So this is on an assumption that we'll hopefully have Title I money, and we'll be able to continue using some of that money towards the adjustment counselor. So the whole 1.0 what we were attempting to do is we funded it with Title I last year, not a full FTE, but we wanted to sort of get it moved into the budget. At this point, with the $432,000 gap, we don't believe we'll be able to do that. And so if you're going to reduce something, we'd say let's reduce that, and let's see if we have Title I funding once we know what that funding will be to help ease that burden. It's no saying that it'll be a 1.0 of what we apply to it to ease it, but we can use some Title I funding for it.
So which building was that for, that adjustment counselor?
I think that was the middle school.
It was the middle school. And
Yeah.
we still have an adjustment counselor there, so
Right, one.
And then when will we find out about the Title I funding?
Jamie, when did we get that?
July.
July? Yeah.
In July?
So, I mean, with a little luck, Carrie, it'll still be there, you know what I mean, and we can, still use it. It's one of the better things to drop and see if we can maintain that. Shy of, if we get the funding, would be doing something else with the money. But with a little luck, we'll continue to get the money, and we'll be able to provide some additional adjustment counseling service at the middle school. Another big item that we have in here is I've reduced the HR director to a 0.5, okay? And that reduction, per se, is not a reduction that says, I want a half a person for a whole year. It's basically a thought that I had where I said, let Dr. Austin come in here. Let him assess the operations for half a year and make that determination of what we actually need from an HR perspective with his direction going forward. And then what we would try to do is we'd make that higher in January. So you have the same financial effect as a 0.5, but in January, we wouldn't be hiring a 0.5, we would be hiring a 1.0. So the other 0.5 would end up in the 2020 budget. Okay, so that's what that 0.5 is. It's not saying, we want a half a person for a whole year. It's giving an opportunity for Dr. Austin to come in, assess the operations, assess what he thinks the needs are on a go-forward basis, and make a decision to hire or not to hire, or to, hire some other combination of what he perceives the needs to be. Okay, so that's a big one with a .5, so that's saving some $50,000.
Jamie, let me also mention that that's not a bad timing for hiring for this year in particular, because it gives Paul a chance to be involved in, is this one of your higher priorities, and have that discussion. And assuming that it is, what focus would you like to see, and get and actually do the hiring, since he would be the person with whom a human resource person would be working out of this office. Well, maybe not out of this office literally, because that's another issue at the moment. We don't have a space to put such a person. So there's a lot to be said, but it keeps the idea alive, and I think that's important.
John, is when that S-2300, reduce this pad to .5 and replace with the paras?
Okay, so that's the 3 elementary schools had requested a .5 special education teacher. They all had 4.5. They wanted to bring them up to 5.0. And the offset to that really was going to be a reduction in para hours. So para hours they'd be losing a para, and they'd get a .5 of a teacher. Okay, the cost of that would have been this. Is it $45,000 or $50,000 in here? Because what I had to do was I had to restore the paras. Okay, take the .5 FTE out of there, but then restore the paras. So while in the actual sheet, as we were going through the budget, we saw that was like a $110,000 item. In reality, it was never. It was a $55,000 item, but I never showed that offset because I didn't believe that we'd always get that offset. Probably not the best thing in hindsight, but so really, what that cost of that instead of 110 was always sort of 55, and by restoring the paras and taking those half FTEs out, we'll save just that 55.
Is that being driven by student
Need or by the budget?
Driven by a feeling of better equity. The .5, do you mean?
Reducing the sped teacher and increasing the and restoring the paras. The decision to do that.
It's really, I think it's student need. I mean, as we were sitting with the principals when they asked for that, it was a little like they wanted to round up their FTE to the .5, to 5.0. And, they said, oh, we could better schedule, we could do this. And nobody was so gung-ho to it that said, oh, we have to have this. It was not really expressed as a need so much as, hey, well, this could make our schedule a little bit easier. So, I mean, in my mind, I interpreted that, okay, Bill, we'll propose that. We'll see if we can do that. But, that is, one of a lower priority, especially if they said, well, yeah, we could do with less paras, and they're just trying to reshuffle things around.
Okay.
So in a tight budget year like this, it seemed to be one of the obvious things that I would want to reverse out, even though it's only $55,000. But at 432, we need a lot of $55,000 to make it balance,
Okay.
And there were other higher priority needs, particularly in the sped request.
Yeah. Which one's that? So we have inclusion. We have the inclusion facilitators staying in here. We have the ABA, and the home services staying in here, and the lab is still in here too.
Yeah.
So I mean, when you think about it too, from an implementation standpoint, you have a director, and when you want to get anything implemented, you have to keep your eye on the ball for like 2 or 3 years. It's not just because you hire a person doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? You have to hire somebody, and you got to stay on it, and you got to stay with it for a couple of years, and then everybody says, look, this is the way it's always been, and that's what we need to get to. This is the way it's always been. So I mean, I think there's a good challenge ahead of our new director anyhow in getting those 3 types of initiatives implemented. So, and, we have to think of this as a continuum, too, right? We're going to, next year, we're going to go again, and we're going to say, okay, how's our programming look? What do we need to do? And we're going to ask for, what's going to be right for our programmatic needs.
We also have very good elementary class size, probably better than we've ever had. And that makes a difference when you're looking at the special ed population as well, to have class sizes that are reasonable, that the teachers can do more inclusive teaching and meet needs that way.
Then I have a couple of small things in here, such as, the crew coach. I took that out of here, and I would suggest, let's use the athletic revolving for a year and allow them to get that coach, and then perhaps we can get it into the budget for the next year. We budget every year more monies than we take in from fees for athletics. But, several years ago, we created a little corpus because we had to have a reserve set up for the field. I've been working that down over the years. I think the $6,000 can flow into that for this next time period. And it does provide, I think it's a good organization. They get a lot of kids. It's training our kids. We have good relationship with Rowan now.
I do know this will not be, assuming the others may be popular votes for all of you. I know this one is not going to be a unanimous vote, but I would like to speak to why it's in there. It's not because we have more students. It's because we, the school committee, wrote an MOU with the Rowing Association. And we've given them the same amount of money roughly for years to help with their coaching budget. But in that MOU was a requirement that you all imposed on them for always having not only a coach with the students in a boat, but also having a coach on land to monitor the behavior and the safety of the children who are coming and going and not on the water at the moment. And so that's why we put it in there, not to say, oh, let's give them some more money, or let's add a boat, or let's have more children that you can serve, but because we imposed another coach to be a land supervisor. And that has added to their budget at a time when their total number of students has gone down slightly, and those students are all paying a pretty hefty fee to be on that team. So that's what's behind it. It's not trying to treat them any differently than we treat any of the other teams, and we're not trying to add a sport, as it might seem like we're doing, with the fact that the rugby has gone from being a club kind of team initiated by kids to not being that this year. All this year, we're not paying for the coach this year, but we felt that was a fair thing to recommend. Obviously, you all will make the decision on that, but right now, it's still there as it was last week, because this is the first time you've seen that list.
And then I think, I was only going to talk about a couple of these things, but I think I ended up talking about all of them. The computer AP supplies of $5,000 is sort of deducted here, thinking, we could get that with end-of-year funds if they were available, or we could even buy them next year, and we'll find a way to make that happen. So, so it's reduced from the operating budget, so we end up with, a balanced budget, per se. So as Dot said, when she started, this is a path. This is just, ideas of, and actually, looking at the people that we need, where the people is always where all, most of the money is, of, a way of getting from negative 432 to, it says positive 36, but that last item here where you see that we got a replacement, I have to increase that number a little bit more. So that was you see, as you go through this tracking, when you see the negatives, that's going the other way. That means that's something we're throwing in that's actually increasing that variance, So that will go up a few more $1,000s. I just sort of learned about that a little while ago, so I didn't get a chance to make that correction.
So to Dr. Gall's point, so if we eliminate the crew coach, that gives us another $6,000, so that'll make...
No, it's already
No,
it's already
he already
eliminated.
put
The
it
crew
in.
coach is already eliminated, Carlos. I'm just proposing an alternative funding mechanism for it, okay? I'm saying the crew coach is eliminated from this path in the operating budget, but I guess I'm
But not
appealing to the
because we're
school
putting it
committee
back.
here, saying, let's fund it from athletic revolving, for the next year, and see if we can get into the budget next year, because we do believe, it's a board-based organization. They have churn. They try to manage a good board with, a number of seniors and juniors and sophomore and parents, right? So those parents constantly turn, and it costs a lot of money, not just in terms of fees, but in fundraising and everything else. It does pretty good for, our kids that are in Rowan. I mean, they'll tout they get good looks at college, they get good looks at, a lot of things. And, it's a nice sport, so, I'm all for trying to help them out a little bit more, so I think that might be, I would recommend that.
Did we have at one point, because I don't see the other line items, did we have a .5 allocated for an assistant to the HR director?
Yes,
And that's still there?
it's still there. Yeah,
It's a
a
half-time
.5
thing.
central, yeah, it's central office, right, .5 central office, so yes, that's still there.
Still there.
Right.
What is the likelihood, what I was thinking here is, since we have now positive $36,000, putting that towards the HR, although it's not going to bring to 1.0, it's going to be close to it. And I understand, the formula that you're using, that, if we hire in January of 2020, we may not need it. But even so, that is a high, level position, so.
Well, we were also thinking that the total amount of money that we had in there for 1.0 was on the low side when you actually.
Correct. For that reason, I would advocate to put those $36,000 towards the HR director, just to increase a little more.
I think there are other reasons for not doing it right away. One of them is there's a lot going on in terms of this whole transitioning at this time. There are some important new positions that are first, and pilots that are first-time things for us that are going to take some additional time, and we need to put our attention to those. So I think this is a good plan of starting later. Now, does that have to be January, or could it be December? I don't know. It also gives us a little breathing room, because things change by the day, that. That happens here. Things change a lot every day, and we hired the other day, and we thought we could go lower, and we couldn't. There was only one candidate that really was satisfactory to fill the job, and so all of a sudden we're out of balance before we've even begun the hiring. Now, we'll hire some lower, and we may, find that there's some dollars that come because of a savings in the hiring that can help us out and give us a little bit of cushion, but it's always good to have a cushion when you start hiring, because when it turns out there's only one person that's the right one, particularly for some of these new special ed plans that we have, the inclusion specialist, for example. We're not going to have 10 people, signing up as that we think will be qualified for those positions, because they're just not out there. And in a job like that, that's new for us, we want to get the best we can get. So we've got to have hiring cushion, and we don't in this year's budget. So obviously, you will vote on that ultimately. Our intent wasn't necessarily that you do any voting tonight, and I know Liza will want to weigh in as well, but whenever it is we do the hiring, you'll make that decision, but it would be hard for us to fill that job now.
Libby?
So I want to back up a little bit. Somebody asked about the central office support.
Yes.
And that if we reduce the human resources director to half, or hire them in January, then we would hire the central office support in January as well. Okay, so that would save $10,000 approximately. Where is that reflected in your new budget tracking? I
Well,
don't
it's
see
a
it.
question of if we hired that in January, would we hire that as a 1.0 or would we hire it at the 0.5? I think what we, with where we are with this budget, with showing a little bit of a positive variance right now, if we made no other changes whatsoever, that would provide an adequate cushion to assess this operation as they come in and then be able to make, good moves.
So you
And
just didn't
Could be
put it in?
December,
You
could
just
be
didn't
November.
put it in there?
I didn't put
The reduction
I
of
didn't
in
reduce the
central office
0.5 of
support?
central office, no,
Okay.
because, the other
Okay.
thing that may happen, Libby, too, is it may come in and understand, see all the work that's going on, and maybe we need to get a 0.5 for September. Maybe we do need a half person, so, because that was not only just HR, but it was central office support, but probably doing mostly HR functions. So it may be one of those things, is like, you want to assess that director a little bit more, but you may need a little support. So I think that the plan of trying to give Dr. Austin a little bit of time to actually be functionally working in this district office and with all the issues that happen throughout the district, to see it and live it, and then have an ability to realize that there's a funding source for helping if you need it. And my guess is that he'll need it, that we'll all need it, that it would be available for him, so.
And we have, we're sitting on right now, two recent, one person left last week and the other one's leaving pretty quickly, people that are our current employees. Remember last summer, we were down 3 people for a long time, and we got really behind. I didn't put it up because it's, I don't think it's visible.
Yeah, it's an eye chart, but it's an eye chart for me.
But anyway, so we're down, Aisha, it's, I think in this, Aisha has already left for another job, and she's our accountant, and our receptionist, who sits at the front desk and does the mail, she's
Andrea.
moving. And so she has limited days left, and takes a while to hire, good people. You can post, but then you have to do advertising, and then they have to give notice, and so you can't get people as quickly as we lose them. And so, at least knowing we can hire somebody else may help us catch up from being,
Yep.
Hiring's getting harder.
Yes.
It's getting a lot harder.
Everywhere.
Okay, so I have another question. Could we talk about what is staying in
Sure.
exactly, and especially in the special ed section? Because I know you mentioned the ABA, I heard
Yeah,
that,
right.
and the inclusion facilitators.
Yep,
Good news.
and the language access-based
So what else? Because
program.
what did I miss?
The language access-based program.
Okay.
And and we're still gonna do the van, the transportation stuff, so.
Yep.
I think that's all the special ed initiatives. Everything's staying in. The only thing
Visiting
sig-
home behavior specialists.
Oh, yeah, that's
Good
part
idea.
of that,
Yep.
the home behavior stuff. And the contract services, I mean, they needed some, the additional contract service
Okay.
amount that stayed in.
So one of in-district pilot?
Oh, both of, there's 2 pilots, right? The home visit and behavior specialist is a pilot, and then the language access-based program is a pilot. So there's 2 pilots.
that's
Both
the
of
same
those are
thing.
staying in.
Okay, I see.
And, so one sees, they have like certain offsets with them. Or we don't know about the language access-based program. There could be an offset, but
Okay.
we don't know. But there is for the nursing, the home behavior services.
Right.
And also for the transportation, where we're gonna take over 3 van runs.
And then what about hiring somebody to take minutes for the school committee?
That actually,
in
if you
here.
look at this thing, so when you see negatives in here, right, that means that the cost of, that the variance is going up. So I think we talked about that one.
Oh, that's what you just asked me.
Mm-hmm.
I added that
Yay.
Yeah, it's
back
it's
in
it's in there. It's like a really small
127,
stipend.
219. You can see that there's an amount of $6,000 for someone to take minutes.
Okay.
And then there's also some PD for the superintendent that, had caused that variance to increase.
So there's a lot of good news in there.
I'm for this. I mean, I think that this is a reasonable path.
Yeah,
I think that it's a good place to go for 2020. I think that it's a good start. I think that'll be, refreshing for the superintendent to come in and to know that they have a balanced budget and a few extra dollars to be able to work things and have a little time to assess things. So I don't think it's a dire budget. I think it's a good budget.
Yeah.
Of course, we did have to do some retractions of FTEs that could have benefited, curriculum, but we always have to think of this. It's a going concern, right? It's a continuum. Next year, we will go through a budget again, and we will reassess our operations, and we'll have new initiatives and new ideas that we should implement, and we'll talk about them, and we'll socialize them, and we'll, hopefully maintain the best of them. So.
No, I think it's a really great path, and appreciate all your work on this. I know it was a particularly challenging budget year, but I think we've incorporated a lot of new, innovative programming in here, and certainly appreciate the extra work that the departments had to do and willingness to shave back where you could. I mean, in an ideal world, we could fund it all, but there was a big shortfall to overcome. So I think you guys did a great job in coming up with a path. So appreciate all the work on that. Do other folks have questions, comments?
No, I just echo that too. Thank you for, that's a big number, big gap to close, and you did it.
Yeah. And we're able to do it by still keeping in a lot of that innovative new programming, which I think is a big win for the district.
Yep.
And I think too, also to your point, having a little cushion is a positive here, because I think with Dr. Austin coming in, there could be things that he wants to make changes organizationally, some staffing changes that we might be able to make. So I think having that little cushion in there will be helpful for him, and for all of the staff as we sort of head into the next chapter.
And at the bottom, you can see the total amount that we reduced the bottom line from the beginning. When
Yes.
the budget first
Yeah,
made.
$657,000.
Yep. So, nice work.
But we thankful for the town for giving us the appropriation they gave us
Yes.
too. I mean, that's, we're a fortunate district that we got 4.45% increase over the previous year. There's not a lot of districts out there that get that kind of funding, so we're very fortunate.
We are. We are definitely very fortunate for that, and appreciate all the community members who reached out to people in the town to tell them about the budget needs of the schools, and how they're ever changing, and how we need to fund them. So appreciate everybody's involvement in this. Is there, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if, as far as voting on this tonight,
Are we planning to? And I was just thinking from a hiring perspective, because we had talked
Yep.
about it at the SPED Subcommittee.
I know.
So whether we should do it tonight or.
Ness, go
I
ahead.
actually would have a thought about the Title I before we vote on anything. The Title I funding for the adjustment counselor.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't get that would be a concern. And I would wonder if we would, instead of having the HR director for the half a year, instead fund the counselor with the amount of money that we have there.
Yeah, I think that's
a good
what
idea.
I was sort of thinking as well. You've got a little, I think in some of these categories, we have some room to move around if we need to. That's the one benefit of the school department budget versus some of the other town budgets, that we can reallocate expenses. So I would agree.
you explain again what you're proposing?
So instead of, if we didn't get the Title I funding for the adjustment counselor for the
cover
middle
the
school,
adjustment
instead
counselor.
of relieving that person, using the half of the HR director, half, FTE for that HR director, and then the additional $30,000 cushion to ensure that we fund that counselor, to make sure that that counselor stays.
We don't have so you're saying take the other half?
If we need to. So I think what John said, how John explained this, was that he was able to take out the $70,000 for the adjustment counselor, not by reducing that position, but that position is now being funded with Title I monies, and assuming that will still happen next year, we can take that out of our budget, But in the, I don't want to say unlikely, but in the event that we don't get the Title I funding to cover that, Ness just wants to make sure that we don't suddenly wake up one day and be like, oh, we have to eliminate that position. We can fund it with other sources, which might be either the surplus and/or a portion of the potential HR director. So,
All we have in there is the half.
Right.
right.
I think that could be an assessment that gets made, as we get, we'll get into July, so we'll see, what we have, and, new superintendent will be here too, and can, vie for one way or the other. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, this HR director is not a certainty as the way it's presented, and,
Yep.
But it is something we've asked for 3 years.
And I do want to make sure that it gets assessed. If it's not needed, then that will be a decision that, is discussed with the superintendent with, in the light of day and full knowledge of what the organization looks like, so.
Yep.
I mean, I think that at the end of the day, we want to make the best decisions for the school system anyways, or we want to direct it to the best place for the school system. So if that's the best place, we'll cut the HR director again,
Right.
But I think we'd like to wait for, instead of saying a vote, that's what will happen, let Dr. Austin assess the situation, I think.
Right.
And then then he'll be vying for an argument one way or the other, I'm sure.
Right. So I guess what we would be, just to confirm, so if in the unlikely event the Title I doesn't cover the.
It's not an unlikely
Yeah,
event.
it could happen, Michelle.
No, sorry.
Know that it's
in the
not an
event, sorry. No, I did not
unlikely
mean to say unlikely. In the event that it isn't covered by the Title IX, the consensus is that will just be covered by some other funds in the budget that are allowed in the budget right now.
That would have some funding.
we'd fund that, right.
Some funding.
Yes.
Whether it be a 1.0 or not. I mean, I'm not sure we're funding a 1.0 now. I think
We're
that
funding a 0.8.
Yeah, we're funding a 0.8. So, I mean, we would, we probably will have to maintain the service. We're not going
Right,
to
exactly.
reduce the
Yes.
service,
Right.
Well, we're not, John, I'm going to argue
Go
with
ahead.
you. We are not reducing the service. We have a full-time adjustment counsel there. We have for a number of years, was reduced to
Right.
half at one point in the tough years of what we call the
Right.
recession.
Right, so we're saying, but
So we
under
have
no
a
circumstances
full-time
will we lose an
adjustment counselor
this
there.
adjustment counselor position in this budget. If we have to move some things around, that will be funded, if it's not funded by Title I.
No, that's funded by the budget. It's there.
Right.
It's there no matter what. It's not at risk.
Yes.
Right, there is a
only this
1.0
additional.
adjustment counselor, and what we're talking about is services above a 1.0.
So, I'm sorry, right now at
Okay.
Hingham Middle School,
Yep.
we have 1.8 adjustment counselors. 1.0 is funded by the budget, and a 0.8 is funded by Title I,
Yes.
just to be clear. So we do have, so there are currently 1.8 FTEs
Yep.
of adjustment counseling. The 0.8 that's funded, so the revisions to the ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act at the federal level allowed for other intervention models other than math and reading, right? And so at the middle school level, our Title I academic program focuses on math achievement. And we, under this new flexibility waiver under ESSA, we're flexed money into a social and emotional intervention program. So right now, the 0.8, and our Title I coordinator here from the middle school, Melissa, is with us right this evening. So if there are any questions more in depth about that intervention program, Melissa or I could easily answer those for you. But the 0.8 that's funded by the Title I grant implements a database multi-tiered model of intervention that is separate from the adjustment counselor who's there funded through the budget. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so the adjustment counseling needs of our students with the population of our students with disabilities, for example, portion of the full-time adjustment counselor's time at the middle school. And so this new role was created to actually move to a more proactive intervention based, sort of looking at data systematically and making intervention and sort of tracking progress over time. So in full disclosure, that would be lost if we lost the 0.8. That's not something that the adjustment counselor that's there now can absorb, if that makes sense.
Right.
But what I hear the committee saying is that's a priority for them, is
Absolutely.
the adjustment counselor.
Yes.
Right, which is fair. So.
Yes.
We anticipate, and the only delay is Title I is federal dollars, right? And so the federal government has to first pass its budget. That money then gets allocated to the states, and the states then have to allocate their federal dollars to the grant programs to the districts. So we generally find out about our Title I funding the second week of July. That's generally when all the allocations are made. So we'll know by early July what the status is of our Title I funding. Not to throw confusion into it, but there is some up in the air about what Title I eligibility will look like now that the state has moved away from its level designations. So it used to be you had to allocate your funds to your lowest performing schools. They're no longer quantifying schools as level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And so we used to assign our Title I dollars to our non-level 1 schools, right? Because in Hingham, they're either level 1 or 2. Under the new methodology, we may be looking at a completely redesigned Title I allocation program in the first place.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with our dollars, has more to do with the state changing accountability models and no longer giving us performance levels like they used to.
Right.
So just as an aside.
Okay.
So I'll be
No.
quiet now, sorry.
No, thank
Fair.
you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So Carrie, to your point on acting on the budget, I mean, if people feel that they're ready to act on the proposed recommended path, tonight, I think we can do that. I mean, Liza is not here. She did send her notes on the budget, and she only had one comment about the crew coach. She wasn't supportive of funding that from revolving, but that was her only comment on the budget. So I think I would agree that in order, we've got to start hiring folks, right? So,
We are starting with the postings.
okay,
But I would caution again about the FTEs, that those are going to change around, in
Right.
terms of the priorities. But the dollars, you'd be voting tonight on the dollars, the knowledge that the FTEs would, and all the other things are really singleton things that you're either going to want to be on this list or not on the list. But the FTEs, I know those are going to change because the needs have changed just since John put this together last week.
right. Sorry, did you have something, Carrie? Oh, sorry. Well, I think we could vote, we've already voted the budget number. So if you are able to, do you need us to vote on this tonight as proposed, this path, or are you saying that this is still going to change anyway, and as long as we are sticking to our 554 million?
I think a consensus could be fine, and then we can start printing out the budget, because you really already did vote a number,
Right.
right? And we're just providing the path, so a consensus that the path seems like a reasonable path. And then that does give us flexibility to move things around if we feel they need to be moved around. But, if we move things, it's going to be a small thing here or there. It's not going to be anything globally changing this path,
Right.
And it would just be based on, new information that the administration got without having to drag the school committee into all the day-to-day decisions.
Right, okay, that seems fair, I think, all right. Fair, everyone? All right, so, does anyone in the audience, I know there's a lot of people here tonight, but everyone seems reasonably happy, so, Tim, you had mentioned, but are you good? Okay, great. All right, so not a formal vote, but are we all in consensus that the path that's been laid out is the way to go, and
And we'll put consideration to the adjustment council. All those are duly noted. Everything that you spoke
Okay.
here today is duly noted.
Great. All right. Terrific. Thank you so much. Thanks again
Thank
for all
you.
that work. Thank you. All right. So, thank you, everyone. So moving on to item 7, new business. 7.1, to hear the English ELA Reading Department Program Review from Mary Andrews. Thank you. Take a moment to switch over.
Is the camera can pick her up over there?
I think so. Does she
It's
have-
right over here. We hid it here. Oh, we're by the side. We're gonna pull it up here.
Okay.
Look at us. Yeah.
And I'm hoping the camera picks you up, Mary.
You'll what?
I hope the camera picks you up.
I hope it doesn't. That's why I'm hidden right over here, Michelle. So please don't
Ah,
break that.
all right, okay. Just hear a voice from
That's my
above.
life floating
We'll just
down.
have the voice from above.
That's why we can't make things.
That's me. Oh, thanks. Oopsie.
So what we're looking at here is an extended fix it for us. As you can see, it shows
I
fingerprints
know.
of this.
He's a technology guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not great. It is what it is.
So while we're getting things hooked up here, I'd like to start by thanking everybody who's shown up tonight. We have so many teachers here, and now it's dark back there, and I'm going to forget someone. I'm so afraid. We have Amanda
back
Smith
row.
from the high school, Zach Raymond from the high school, Kara Rock from the high school, Kate Dollar from the high school, Carol Marshall from the high school, Courtney Bruno from the high school. We have from our reading team, we have Chrissy Swanson from South School, and we have Mary Beth Robinson, the secondary literacy coordinator, Melissa Goldman, our reading teacher at the middle school. Thank you. Am I missing any English people? And thank you to Katie and Dave who've taught me the ropes to directorhood here, so thank you for coming. It's great for everybody to have come, but the high school people, we've had such an adventure of a day, so the fact that they're not home hiding under their beds
I know.
is especially excellent. While I'm on the thank you path here, this lovely cover was brought to life. I'm an idea woman, but this I could never do. Nick Thompson, super talented graphic arts student, put that together for me, which was great. And it helps me to frame, and a huge thanks to Lainey Silva. Just so you know, this covers the last 5 years, 2014 to 2019, and the first 3 were under the reign of Lainey. And my goal in the last 2 years is to not break anything she fixed up for us. So far, maybe okay. So thank you, Lainey. She was so helpful in filling in all the gaps and getting me up to speed in many, many ways. I thought that it would make the most sense to frame this in terms of the ELA journey. And we had the elementary reading specialists interview some of their children in the kindergarten, first grade, second grade, about what are the hardest things about reading and writing. And then we had some college students kindly answer the question, how did the Hingham Public Schools prepare you for your college adventures in reading and writing? And they were so great to send them in. I will say, apparently, when college students make videos of themselves, it ends up looking a little Blair Witch Project, but it's okay. They were excellent, and we're very grateful. I should also say, many of them talk about their high school experience only because that's the last thing they remember. This was certainly a cumulative effort from everybody from K through 12. So I'll start off. I can make everything else faster in my review, but this deserves 3.5 minutes of your time. Oh, where's the sound? Computer guy? I feel like there's no sound. Okay, so I apologize for the sound, but hopefully you got the gist that we go a long way from the hardest letter is F to the aesthetic purposes of finding my own voice in my Jane Austen class. So we're going to frame tonight as sort of how do we get there? How do we bring those students from kindergarten to all the way to college? So first off, just as a sort of backbone of the presentation, we are sort of Bible of what we have to align our curriculum to is this 2017 Mass Curriculum Framework for English Language Arts and Literacy. Just came out in June 2017. Thankfully, for our discipline, it was pretty similar to the one that had come out in 2011. So there was just some tweaking. There were no major overhauls. Same strands: reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language. Same anchor standards for the most part, and then grade level standards that are broken into pre-K through 5 and ELA 6 through 12. So the way that we approach instruction in K through 5, we adopted a new reading program. This is our third year with the Journeys program, and I'll talk a little bit more about how that adoption took place when we talk about changes. But overall, it is our core reading program. Each week's lesson integrates phonics, grammar, writing, and spelling for a total language arts approach. And we also allows for us to give skill development in the 5 components of reading, which is phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. And it's a vertically articulated program that logically builds from one grade to the next. As far as writing goes at the elementary school, a few years back they had chosen the Empowering Writers program, mostly because it dovetails so nicely with the writing program that we have in place in the secondary level, so it's a very logical leap to go from the narrative diamond to the pillars when they're looking at expository opinion and narrative writing. And you probably saw the sample I put in your packet. We have a first grader writing an opinion piece on why we should in fact try green eggs and ham. So that's because it has lots of calories and makes your taste buds grow. So what would be not to love? On the secondary level, there haven't been too many changes since the last program review, except for, and I'll talk about them in a few minutes, but STEM Lit Lab has combined now since the last 5 years, and we've added a few new senior seminars, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's see, for our writing, sort of the crown jewel of the secondary program in that we're constantly offering explicit instruction, a variety of types of writing, really emphasizing the structure. You heard some of those students talk about how that becomes internalized for them, so they can just, it's old hat by the time they move on from us. And that practice is because we're looking at a lot of writing, 12 per year, grades 6, 7, and 8, and 15 to 16 at the high school level. We're looking at a portfolio system that we've had in place for a long time. Teachers are starting to play with, some teachers are moving toward a totally online portfolio, which would have the same parameters of expectations of feedback and student reflection. Some are in a hybrid mode, grading more online as now that we have more technology available to us in the form of Google Docs and even Turnitin, some high school teachers. And then some are still, everybody's revising and helping online, but preferring to keep everything in one place in paper form, which is fine too. We're all getting there somehow. As far as the literature goes, for secondary, we try to really choose a wide range: poetry, short story, novels, essays, plays. We want to make sure students are exposed to a rich and varied array of genres and authors, a broad expanse of topics, cultures, perspectives. And we're really aiming to try to get them to develop their critical thinking skills and to get meaning on both a literal and figurative level from challenging text. Once we hit the secondary level, reading and English sort of become their own established entities. Reading comes more in the form of support. At the middle school, we have in grades 6 through 8 reading labs where students are given extra support every other day, and they work on more comprehension strategies and things that they can apply to their other disciplines. We have that for 9th grade students who are still in need of that support, secondary literacy strategies, and that also helps them with comprehension in their core classes, and core literacy strategies, which does the same thing for 10th graders, but also exposes them to the type of passages and practice that they'll need for the reading comp part of the MCAS. Through grades through 6 through 12, there are also students who continue to need specialized reading, usually a one-on-one type of setting, and that would be per an IEP requirement. Okay, I don't even know, I hope I mentioned that we're not just English and reading, we're drama. So this is another part of our program review here, that we have multiple electives in drama offered both at the both at the middle school and the high school. I've seen many of you at those performances, so thank you. It's always nice to see you there. And we'll talk about some of the changes we've had to the program in a little bit, and then the performance opportunities are pretty varied. If we start to talk about the changes made since the 2014 program review, the biggest ones for the elementary school would certainly be the Journeys adoption, how that came about. They used to have a literacy committee in place where they'd have a subcommittee, an adoption committee. In 2014-15, they started to review and research programs. They settled on 3. They went to presentations and did a lot of extra research, and then spent the following school year, or the end of that school year, heading into other districts using those 3 programs to observe it in action. And then they ended up getting the feedback, meeting multiple times with teachers, and making the decision in the spring of 2016 that Journeys would be the program that we would adopt as a district. So now we're in year 3 of Journeys. Finally, that's really the year you start to really have a grasp of all the different offerings of the package, and the technical aspects that sort of need tweaking here and there as well. So people are finally more comfortable. It takes a while for sure. The other big transition that happened over the course of since the last program review, we had this transition from more grade ABCD report cards to standard-based report cards. That work was done prior to like 2015-16 with grades K through 2. When I started in July of 2017, we were starting to work with the 3rd grade team. We spent that first year, we had a summer workshop for a sort of representative group from grades 3, 4, and 5, where we isolated power standards and started to look at how we wanted them to be presented on the report card, and then moved to making sure that we were benchmarking the standards appropriately, because we wanted to make sure, now that we were having semester report cards, that we were reporting to parents at this point in the school year, is your child meeting or exceeding or approaching the semester benchmark, as opposed to your child isn't yet doing what he or she doesn't need to be able to do till June anyway, which doesn't seem like helpful information. So benchmarking the standards that we were reporting on became a big part of the responsibility. So we did that with 3rd grade last year, finished up with 4th grade this year. So that rollout of standard-based report card is moving along with this group who's now in the 4th grade, and then we start the work with 5th grade, or continue from July. We started a little bit 2 years ago, and we have a workshop this Thursday with the 5th grade, and we'll bring them through, introduce them to the midpoint check-in that we now have in place for the midpoint of each semester, and get them comfortable, because it's really a shift in philosophy moving from letter grades to standard-based report card, because all of a sudden you'll have 12 or so ELA standards on a single report card, and you're isolating a child's progress on a particular standard, as opposed to using all that data to give you an average for the child in the class. So it really takes a shift in thinking about grades, and we've been trying to do some work on that too. And teachers have really done some amazing things as far as figuring out a way to keep this data in a new style, and they've found some nice programs to help them. So as usual, they are leading the way. We have also had a change in grade 6 where we merged. It used to be that you'd have Lit Lab every other day for alternating terms, and STEM, sort of the opposite of that. And Lauren Sioka and Tim Siokis joined forces for this great project-driven, collaborative, creative class that they teach together every other day to all 6th grade students. And it's really fun to go see their projects on when they present their Everest exploration and how they design a coat that will withstand the Arctic, and their marketing stances that they have to project to get customers to buy their coats, and they invite parents to the DLT to see the final product. It's a cool production. Since the last program review, we always had drama at the 7th and 8th grade level. We introduced it in, I think 2 years ago, as part of this exploratory cycle that all the sixth graders go through now, sort of sampling the electives. And so that's supposed to give them different skills connected to their choral poetry, mime, storytelling, technical theater, script writing, team building. They work collaboratively and have projects due at the end. And it's a good way for kids to see if they want to pursue drama as an everyday elective as 7th and 8th graders. Our final changes at the middle school, or major changes since the 2014 program review, would be the adoption of the One Book, One School program that we now have in place. This program has really taken off under the direction of Lauren Sayoka and Melissa Goldman and their One Book, One School team. It's been really amazing what they've been able to do with this. They choose the book that everybody reads, students, staff support, staff administrators. And then that's morphed into turning into a One Book, One School day. The first book that they read, Long Walk to Water, was so popular and inspirational to students, they ended up doing sort of community support fundraisers and raised $15,000 to build a well in the Sudan. They also, we try to spread the wealth with other disciplines too. Next year was World Without Fish, and we look to our friends in science to look at the environmental crisis of overfishing. Refugee was last summer's community read, and we looked at the refugee crisis in their history classes, and again at One Book, One School Day, which is typically the first half day in November. And this year, don't tell, the big reveal is the end of this week, but we're looking at the miscalculations of Lightning Girl. We're inviting our math pals to the party. A young girl gets struck by lightning, and she's a math savant. There's hope for all of us. So go stand outside. And what we are excited about is this week when we introduce this to the students, Melissa and Lauren have already arranged for this author, Stacy McAnulty is her name, and she has prepared a video to introduce herself to the students, and she'll be challenging them to pretend she were to write a sequel. Would you please create a cover and a title, and we'll have a competition for when she comes. They've hired her to come on our next One Book, One School Day, and she'll be running workshops with all the kids, which is really exciting. Yeah, they do some amazing things. Let's see, Notice and Note pilot is, when I started last year, teachers were looking for not a program, this is just a tool in the toolkit for note-taking. We wanted some common language for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers to be able to use with their students as a way for students to get into literary texts without necessarily always needing study guide questions to say, go find this on page 10, or what did the boy do on page 11. And so these signposts were a way in. The team liked it so much for professional practice goal in the first year with the Notice and Note signpost for fiction that we went ahead and did the nonfiction book study as a group this year. And so far they've been really happy with the results of what students are able to do on their own, getting into text. So we're moving forward with that as a note-taking strategy. At the high school, we had 2 new senior seminars come into play, I think 4 years ago now. How that evolved was the prior director, Lainey Silva, had teachers present pitches for new ideas for senior seminars, and they were then presented to the juniors that year through a survey, and the 2 finalists, top finalists, were added to the program of studies, and that was Detectives in Literature and Global Issues in Literature, which counts as a GCP course. We also are working on a vertical articulation of a grammar program at the high school. That was the result of a survey that I started with when I first started last year, and people had said that it's not that we weren't teaching grammar, because we were and always have been, but it had been as a response to student writing. And what was happening was, depending on where you landed in what class and who was having what writing problems, we weren't allotting, 9th grade, you're in charge of this, and this needs to happen with mechanics and usage by the time you come here to 10th grade. And so this was our way of trying to make sure that there were no gaps in the grammar instruction before we send them off on their merry ways. We are in year 2 of that program. We got the resources, shared resources, lessons, and common assessments together last year for the 9th graders and rolled that out this year. We are working on the same 3 sets of things for the 10th graders and be rolling out that next year. It'll be a 4-year rollout so that we can see the cumulative impact of on the class of 2022. We hope to have some, hopefully, supportive pre- and post-test data to prove that we're making some significant changes here. Let's see. District-wide, we've had a few big ones, and the biggest one would be the transition from legacy paper-based MCAS to the computer-based next-generation MCAS. That started in spring of 2017. We had grade 4 and grade 8 online. By last spring, we had grades 3 through 8 taking the next-generation MCAS all online, and this year we had our maiden voyage at the high school with next-generation MCAS, 10th grade. So I'm not going to make anyone take the MCAS, but I did want to show you, I think it is worth understanding that as far as the reading and writing and teaching that goes, we've got that down. We've got a good system going. A whole new set of skills comes in when you're looking at, this is a grade 6 practice test released by Pearson. It becomes a matter of, I just wanted to show you a few, teaching children how to toggle through, even something little for the little kids at 3rd grade. Oh, there aren't just 2 paragraphs. Make sure you go all the way down or things get confusing on the last questions, right? And it seems silly, but it's true that how to take the test becomes as tricky as what's on the test, right? So we have to spend time teaching them the answer eliminator, bookmarking, highlighting. I would say, I'm going to show you this at the end of this test, big emphasis on paired passages on the new next generation MCAS, synthesizing information. We even had our first go around at a triple passage at the high school this spring, so see how that went. Here we have a play about Matthew Henson and a nonfiction piece about him, and the children are expected to answer questions on both, but they also need to know how to toggle back and forth between the two and, again, read the whole text all the way down. It's tricky, even learning things like if you highlight on 2 pages ago when you read the play, the highlighting doesn't carry over when you're reading it again 3 pages later. So little things like that that again become, oh, sorry, I'm talking about things that aren't there. What happened? It died. Am I showing you nothing? Okay. Thank you, Katie. What happened? Was it ever there, or it just never came? Okay. All these exciting things that I'm seeing, you're not getting to see. Okay, well, hold that thought. You can look at it in a link another day. So I also won't dare to go. The big challenge that I wanted to show you was the text box, and I was toggling through a real test, I promise. I wasn't up here just being silly. But the text box is a challenge for students to practice with because we are looking at them writing 5,000 character essays, the equivalent of 2 pages, in a text box where they can only see 1,200 characters at once. It's the equivalent of trying to write an essay on your phone, right? So it's a challenge to say the least. So practicing with the text box so that they can get comfortable with that format becomes as important as knowing how to write a narrative or expository or opinion text. So that's been a challenge. I promise also there's a fancy dancy website here that Courtney Bruno made to house all our resources, but I'm afraid to click on it. Let's see what happens. No, I see it. It's great. You would love it if you could see it. So thank you, Courtney. Firefox is now installing updates. That should be excellent. So, no, that wasn't it. That was our teachers. That's not an MCAS test. Okay, so let's move right along. Faster for you. Somebody hijacked me. Well done. Our program strengths, far and away, the personnel, cream of the crop. Couldn't be happier, feel so lucky to work with this team. They are really amazing on all levels, and they have been very patient in helping me get my learning curve going here in the first 2 years. Let's see. We have some pictures there of Kate Dollard, who's here tonight, was a Rookie of the Year at PCEA this year, and some teachers went down with her to be supportive. And we have Heather Sullivan there with Remy, and I'm blanking on Remy's last name, but he just recently, thank you, Urbano, and he just won a Holocaust Essay Award, and she went into Boston with him and his family to receive it. It was pretty powerful. That was May 5th, I think. And that sort of dovetails really nicely into the other strengths, because they carry out this writing program that's a behemoth, really. If you see them carrying these folders and papers around all the time, or their one little computer, that's false advertising, because if they're correcting online, it looks easier than it is. They should carry 60 computers to show you the bulk. Let's see. We have students always, like you saw in the video, hopefully heard a little bit, that they're always thanking us, writing emails, cards. Thank you, I'm so prepared. I feel like I really knew what I was doing when I got to college. English was easy. Kids asked me to help them with their projects. And I think part of the reason that both our writing and our reading curriculum is so strong is because the teacher choice is all there. And they're the driving forces here about, they really have a healthy respect for traditional academic texts, but they're also very innovative, and they're always changing the curriculum and making it adapt to new and exciting things that are coming out all the time, and they're ahead of it always. We are purposely trying to be selective when we look at our summer reading lists in our grade level teams, or our curriculum in general. We're looking to find a nice balance of classic works, contemporary pieces that are critically acclaimed, and new selections representing a range of voices. It is a goal to be inclusive. Our choices enable students to experience different genres, a variety of writing styles, diverse cultures, and gender balance in terms of both authors and protagonists, because that becomes equally important. Okay? And the goal for our literature selections are to challenge our students and encourage discussions that promote inclusivity, compassion, empathy, tolerance, respect, and an understanding of our common humanity. And that is a driving force always when we're reviewing our lists. Our new PD program that was brought about just a few years ago, this idea of teachers being able to choose what they'd like to take part in on 3 half-days in the district, have allowed us to really offer some nice content area offerings. We did an Empowering Writers offering for the elementary teachers last year. We've also been able to offer how to leverage global education to empower our youth. And this year we had BSU, Bridgewater State professors come in to teach us genres that we're afraid to teach. They reviewed new and innovative ways to teach the short story, poetry, and graphic novel. Next year we are hiring them again to come back to teach a 3-part course entitled Teaching Diversity, Cultural Relevancy, and Multiculturalism. So we look forward to more content PD. It was great to be in that setting with everybody and really feel like you're in a graduate course with all these pals who are interested in the same thing. We also have 2 of our own ELA middle school teachers who will be running a K-12 offering of assistive technology for the inclusive classroom. Caroline Farris and Lauren Seoka are really passionate about bringing sort of these adaptive technologies into the inclusive classroom. They presented to our department, they presented to the special ed department, and they'll be taking their show on the road to this PD session next year so that everybody can benefit from their expertise. Let's see. We continue to be very proud of our drama program. Students still win at the drama competitions, both as a group, on group levels, and on individual levels. Next year, we are also going to expand the program at the middle school to include a skills-based drama program that Mo Fish will be incorporating into her rotation. And she's excited about that. She had started that with 2 students this year just to see how it would go, and she was very pleased with the results. We also have plans in progress to hopefully be able to have the staff allotment. We share our drama teacher at the high school also teaches English classes, so if we can free her up enough from English to teach a section of skills for drama to skills students, that is the goal there too. We have much evidence of student success here. We're proud of ELA's role in the DESE recognitions that Plymouth River and South recently were awarded this fall. Also, we have some role in the high school being named by Gale databases recently in the top 10 in Massachusetts for best usage of the research materials. We have specific ELA street cred that we can brag about in terms of the essay contest winners that we have. The Patriots Pen, every December, November, we have students who qualify there. And like I mentioned, Remy's recent win with the Holocaust Essay Contest, we have students who move on in the Poetry Out Loud competitions, run by Carol Marshall at the high school. And this fall, the Harbor Light took a second place in the Online Journalism Award at a banquet for local schools hosted by Suffolk University. Each year since our last program review, we have enjoyed a 100% passing rate on the first round of the 10th grade ELA Legacy MCAS every time, and even before that too. We've had a good run of good luck. We don't know how this new test will leave us, but that's okay. We expect good things because we've seen them before. So just a quick look, more for a visual, not to take a lot of time, but I think it's helpful to see how grades and ranges fall. This multicolored one at the top is sort of this mishmash of ELA grades 3 through 8 in the entire district and how students fall in the district versus the state. When you do that big grab of 3 through 8, it also grabs students who are on out-of-district placements too, so the number is a little off, but that's more in line with what we can expect. These are our legacy MCAS results, which have been pretty much through the roof, quite honestly, 75% advanced and 25%-ish proficient. We do expect this spring's test to be more in keeping because of the new benchmarking. A gentle reminder that there's a little bit more of a gentle scale this year for the grading, and next year, while MCAS tweak some things where it's a graduation requirement, they really can't, they have to make sure they have everything straightened out before they start calling a score something that counts towards graduation or not. So we do have 2 years for everybody to get their proverbial acts together. Let's see. There's more data about MCAS in your reports, but certainly in the report that Jamie has online that's broken down much more. Obviously, this is a super general compilation. Our AP scores we continue to be very proud of. We now have English Lang and English Lit offered at the high school. I think it had just started the first year of Laney's last program review. English Lang Lit has been around for a while, but obviously when we look at the mean grades and how we compare percentage-wise of grades 3 and higher on the AP scores for Massachusetts and the nation, it is pretty telling of. So right now we have Jill Jope teaching English language and Kara Roth teaching English Lit, and they would be the first to tell you that, again, this would be a cumulative effort, but it is not to diminish all the work they do with getting these students prepared, which is pretty awesome. SAT testing, this is what we have from last year from the class of 2018. Again, holding our own more than a little against the Massachusetts and national averages. And then down here is the SAT subject test, English Lit. It's usually only 20-ish kids who end up choosing to take that. There are a few schools that now require it, and the ones that do, quite honestly, are more mathematic engineering bent. So, but still the ones who do take it do quite well. And I would say that's true across the country. That's not a super popular test, so the ones who do it are the high flyers in the subject area. As far as areas for future growth, one of the things that we hear again and again is about more opportunities for collaboration with special educators, especially where we're looking at a lot of co-teaching models. It's hard to make time to plan and assess and revamp and revise, sort of meeting each other on the fly. And it's always hard to find time. Everybody wants more time. One of the things that has been brought up at both the high school and the middle school is a look at the schedules to see if we can be creative about somehow implementing an X block or some other place that would maybe give us some of the time that we're looking for. Right now we do have special educators when they don't have their own meetings, come to department meetings, especially at the middle school to get some resources for MCAS. or to share some best practice ideas, but it's really only on their own time. It's nothing that's official. We do have, one of the things that we've also heard again and again as part of the change is that it has been challenging to, change is good and it's been great in many cases, but it's been a lot too, especially if we're looking at in the district, right, new ELA director trying to figure things out, 3 new principals, new assistant superintendent, new director of student services, and imminently a new superintendent. And while all this change is happening at the elementary school, they're also doing new standard-based report cards, new MCAS, and new Journeys program. So it's been a lot to navigate. So I think everybody's just sort of hoping for a little bit of time to just slow down and just work on what we know here. Class size and available classroom space. This is really an issue that is cropping up at the high school, and not even when we're on fire and closing out 16 classrooms. Even when things are good, it's getting tight, especially hosting the bubble years. We have 4 traveling teachers in the English department. This year we ran 10 English classes at 25 or over, just because scheduling can be tricky. And we don't have space for, like, there's not a common, so teachers are never in their classroom during a free period anymore because all the classrooms are used all the time. So we have sort of migrant English teachers finding places in different parts of the building each day to try to meet with students for extra help, and it's a little bit tricky. So I know that the high schools, aside from this past week, filed under the least of our worries, but I anticipate it'll be coming up soon because it's reminding me of when I was here back in '94 when I started, when things were getting, that was our first sign, when you couldn't move anywhere in any block, that things were getting full. The last thought I'll leave you with, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the articles I included in the program and the whole review of the packet, but this idea, we see a big decline in humanities majors, especially in the past 10 years, and it makes sense on a lot of levels, right? We have so much at stake in the world of technology and science and business. And it would be silly to say that those things aren't important. I had to import the computer guide to turn my thing on tonight, so that's real. But that said, I think that in a STEM world, we have to make sure that we're reinforcing for students the value of the humanities and how we are shaped as people who work with and care for each other is really important for them, and to not be able to expect to get an answer to every problem by hitting a button, and to grapple with that difficult text is worth the struggle. And what I thought I found here, didn't even know it till recently. Even Charles Darwin says, "Go humanities." So if one of our premier scientists and the founder of the theory of evolution says yes to the humanities, who are we to say no? And according to his autobiography, he apparently said, "And if I had to live my life again, I would have made a rule to read some poetry and listen to some music at least once every week, for perhaps the parts of my brain now atrophied would thus have been kept active through use. The loss of these tastes is a loss of happiness, and may possibly be injurious to the intellect, and more probably to the moral character, by enfeebling the emotional part of our nature." So, thanks, Charles Darwin, and thank you all. And now I'm ready for some really easy questions. Like, how do you spell English? No, just kidding. Yes, first easy question would be good. I can't believe I talked so long about the MCAS and never knew you weren't seeing it. Sorry. I'll send you all the link. Okay.
No, it was very, very well done. Thank you very much. As a former English major myself, I appreciate
good.
the yes.
And look where she landed.
Exactly. And all this could be yours too.
All this could be yours too. Where's HQ?
Does anyone have any questions or comments for Mary Andrews?
Well, as a former biology major, I guess I'll go first.
All right, you go first.
Mary, thank you. And thank you to your staff. I was approached by a parent and with a couple of questions, so let me just ask you and look for some feedback. It's my understanding, talking with the parent, that the teachers at the middle school and the high school use peer review editing in class during writing projects rather than teacher editing and input.
So I would say never instead of. Do we also have peer editing? Yes. And I think that to be done well, and our teachers do it really, really well, is to have a scaffolded outline in place where they have very tangible comments that the proofreader is looking for. I would be the first to admit that without sort of those supports in place, peer editing can go south quickly. But I would say, especially from reviewing writing folders, which is just part of what I do every time I observe a teacher, when I'm looking for their peer editing checklists, they're very, so when we have peer editing checklists in, an AP class, what the kids are going to be proofreading each other's essays for is pretty high-level stuff. And when we're looking in sort of middle school classes, we would really have to be looking at things like, is there a period at the end of every sentence, or highlight or underline the topic sentence, tell your partner if if you see an I in their writing. So it would have to be pretty direct instruction, and I would say I'm seeing that. It would never be instead of teacher feedback. It's one step in the process, certainly, but I think that the amount of one-on-one conferencing that our teachers do, and certainly editing of final drafts, none of these revisions would ever be decided by a peer editor for sure. But I think it's really important that it's not a helpful class activity to say switch papers and fix. We need a clear outline and checklist, and they do have them.
Thank you.
Mary, just one quick question. So you all may seen on the Boston Globe yesterday the commencement address done by our local resident, former resident of Hingham, Mr. Fish. He happens to be the owner and founder of Southwick. He addressed the graduated students at Curry College yesterday. I happened to be there for friends of mine who graduated. And he stated how it was frightening for him, having grown up with dyslexia, to stand in front of the classroom and read, knowing that now it's just part of the 504. Is there any program in place to sort of like encourage kids with dyslexia to stand without being afraid of speaking up and reading?
So that's a really good and timely question. In that, in Massachusetts in October, we just passed some dyslexia screening laws, so it's sort of the hot topic right now, and it's really a big part of Lauren and Caroline's program that they're bringing to all different departments in the district, is this use of assistive technology in order for children to access curriculum in a way that dyslexia and other diagnoses like it would prevent them from doing, but also allowing them ways to sort of imitate the cadence of speech and understanding. But there are practices in place where, especially with dyslexia screening laws that we now know so much more of, that we know not to ever cold call on a student with dyslexia, and from their IEPs or 504s, we know to only if he or she raises her hand, her hand in order to call on them that they're comfortable enough with the passage or have pre-read it. So tactics like that in place, certainly, but that has been part of the big push with this. And that was one of the things I forgot to mention at the high school with our technology that we have with our Chromebook carts at the high school. We have one-to-one computing at the middle school, and then at the elementary schools we have dedicated iPad carts and Chromebook carts, K through 2 iPad and 3 through 5 Chromebook. And they're all have these assistive technology features that is definitely a priority of ours. And one of the things that we just were able to purchase this spring for this very reason is a dedicated Chromebook for each English classroom for any teacher, any student, and we have the ear headphones as well for any child who needs anything translated for in text-to-speech method for them to understand. So it's definitely part of our pedagogy now. It's really timely.
Thank you.
My question sort of dovetails on that. And you had mentioned for areas, first of all, great job. I loved hearing about this. We've been to the plays. I love everything you do. But you had mentioned an area for future growth, more opportunity for collaboration with special education teachers. and you'd mentioned the schedule as being a big thing. What's the plan for moving forward and growing and improving in that area?
I think our biggest hope is this relooking at the schedules at both schools. And it's never, quite honestly, it's never going to be totally enough. We need time to meet as a sixth grade team. You need time to meet, with your English teachers at the same grade level, and then also your teammates on your teams at the middle school. But then also to ask for more time than that, it is tricky. There's never enough time in the day. But the places that Pembroke, and there's another school that Rick had sent a squad to look at recently, I'm blanking on which one it was, but to look at these different ways that the X block is used as a way of opening up time for students to do different sorts of electives or remediation or other activities, but also making the teachers' schedules more flexible, that even if you were able to get a block a month with a co-teacher, it would be helpful, because now it's sort of on the fly or electronically, which is fine, but it's better to be able to connect, especially, in a real co-teaching model. If you're sharing grading and assessment, that's real. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I have a question.
And it's based on personal experience, watching my kids go through the system, and starting in first grade when one of them needed extra help reading. And I went to a Title I class for parents to teach us how to help our students learn to read, and reread, reread, or what, and you time them and all that. And it was extremely useful and helpful, and it made a big difference in his ability, because I sat down with him and I made him do it, and then flash forward to him being in high school and having to write 5-paragraph essays, and I'm trying to help him, and I have no idea how to write a 5-paragraph essay. And there was a class for the parents, and I went to it, and that was extremely useful. And so I'm just wondering if you're still doing that kind of thing, and what kind. And I know it's a lot to ask, but keeping the parents up to speed with all of these things that are the kids are doing that are so exciting is huge.
Especially the thesis essays, I think, is helpful. So I did attend those nights with Lainey and sort of helped her in the background when she ran them, and then we have the whole night on the ELA website right now, so I'm pretending that the ghost of Lainey delivering I'll stand in front of the camera and do it again. No, I'm just kidding. But that would be something that would be happy to bring back, especially I think it's helpful to probably still have the resources, and we give them to every new family to the district, because they really do get introduced to the writing program in general at the middle school, and then it sort of takes off from there at the high school, so they're familiar with the sort of lingo and expectations. But any new family to the district, we do have prepared sort of folder binder type things with all samples, and but we could delete Lainey's link and I'll do one. No, I'm just kidding. After tonight, I'm feeling much braver, Libby. I'll do that. I can do that. Okay. We could do a tutorial.
All right, well, that sounds great. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Mary. That was really
Thank
excellent.
you.
Thank you very much. All right, well, you deal with the
I know,
technology
I'm afraid to
piece
pull
now.
out a plug. You keep talking.
Leave that to the experts
Do I just
over
put this
there.
out here?
All right, we'll move on to, thank you, everyone. We will move on to item 7.2, which is to discuss a resolution in support of increased funding for Massachusetts public schools and act as appropriate. We had started this discussion at our last meeting on May 6th. Liza and Libby did some work to make some suggested edits to it. Thank you both for doing that. They are in your packets. And then very quickly, a couple of us, myself, Ness, and Carlos, had attended, along with many of the teachers, at the Hingham Public Schools, the Fund Our Future rally at the State House last Thursday, and that was a great event, and I think it got us much more motivated to get these resolutions passed. So, Libby, do you want to sort of walk us through them? Or does anybody, or has everybody read them?
I didn't work on the Cherish Act, just the one that had specifically mentioned the Promise Act, and so Liza and I changed it. Do you have a hard copy, or, because my
the red line one?
computer
Yeah.
is
Dead.
dead.
If you want me to pull up the other one, I can.
So the Promise Act just didn't feel like it was enough for Hingham specifically. It doesn't address all of our needs and all of the whole state's needs. And so we went through, Liza found multiple different sources to try to pull together a comprehensive list of things that we're concerned about and that need to be addressed, and to ask at the end that the legislature approve an Education Finance Reform Act in 2019, so like now, that will fully address the needs in all of the districts. Rather than saying that we approve specifically of the one Promise Act as opposed to the Tucker and the, what's the other one? There are three. So we kept most of all of the whereas statements, Michelle, that you had already put in, but we added more. I don't know if you want me, how.
Yeah, looks good. So
If you want me to go through them.
yeah, so it kept the most of the original language that is
Yeah.
recommended.
Right.
It just took out particular references to the Promise Act.
Right.
To request of our legislators that they update the foundation budget formula that would bring Hingham in all districts an increase in general state financial aid. So before we read them in full, and apologies to folks in the audience, I think they're trying to bring them up.
Baker.
I think they're trying to bring it up here. So I'll have Libby read the whole thing. It's mildly lengthy. But before Libby reads it, does anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts on it, or do you want to, for people?
Thank you for doing it, because, yeah, I think I'm much more comfortable signing on something like this than the original one. So, yeah, I appreciate all the work you and Liza did.
Okay.
I mean, my only thing is that, we are sort of like, pushing this resolution mainly to show to our fellow school committees and teachers and so on that we are on board and supporting, funding our schools. So I sort of like was on the mindset of, having Promise Act on the title, along with other acts that enhance the fund of our educations. It's just, the title makes the text much, much stronger. That's my only concern. And sometimes, a resolution won't do much. I appreciate Libby and Liza that you guys addressed, the other items that I brought up to your attentions in terms of, what the Massachusetts Association of School Committees would like to see it, which is, to fund up to $100 per student. I appreciate that. But, that's just my comment, that, for the title, I don't mind you removing the Promise Act from the other areas, but as part of the title, that we should perhaps consider leaving that there. Any other acts presented that will address the formula.
Well, I think, Carrie, were you the one who mentioned that mask was not?
Yeah, so their take on it is so there are three. There's Governor Baker's proposal, there's Senator Tucker's proposal, and then there's the Promise Act. And my understanding from our day on the Hill and the other thing was that they are not in favor of any particular act at this point, and that it's going to, as it goes through, there will probably be compromises, and the end product, we don't know what that's going to be yet. So they were supporting a bunch of different initiatives, which I feel like Liza and Libby captured very well here. I wouldn't feel comfortable signing on in support of a particular act at this point, because it still has to work itself out. But I think we should sign on and support everything that is listed here. Does that make sense?
No, I understand.
Yeah, because I think the Promise Act is one piece of legislation, but this resolution, as drafted by Libby and Liza, includes fully funding the METCO program, putting in education finance reform now versus, I mean, this could take several years to figure out some of the things that they're trying to do in some of the other acts, and recognizing that there isn't a one-size-fits-all, but I think really here making a call to action that we need to get something done, and they need to either compromise and come up with some, so I think that was the rationale between taking out just the particular language about the Promise Act and making it a little more broader to encompass all the things that the Hingham School Committee, other school committees, MASC, and whatnot think that we need our legislators to do to try to fully fund our school budgets. So what would you like to do? Are people ready to act on this tonight? Yeah? Carl, sorry. So, Libby, it is up on the board now. Does anybody in the audience have any questions or comments? Okay. So, Libby, do you want to read it through, the proposed resolution, and then we could vote on whether or not we want to approve this particular resolution?
Sure.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
All right. Resolution in support of increased funding for Massachusetts public schools. Whereas free public schools available to all students without exception are foundational to our democracy and are required by the state constitution. And whereas all of our students, no matter where they live, deserve high-quality public schools that teach the whole child and provide them with a well-rounded school experience that addresses their academic, social, and emotional needs. And whereas the state's foundation budget formula, which determines state aid to each district, has been woefully out of date for years, thereby underfunding our districts by more than $1 billion a year for essential educational services. And whereas the legislature failed to pass any foundation budget legislation in the last session, leaving districts, educators, and students without the funds necessary to support the schools our students deserve. And whereas an updated foundation budget formula should bring Hingham and all districts an increase in general state financial aid, including formula adjustments for inflation, higher allowances for economically disadvantaged students, special education and English language learners, enhancements to school safety, provisions for social and emotional health, and adjustments to insurance costs to reflect actual costs. And whereas the legislature failed to fully fund METCO, special education circuit breaker funds, charter school reimbursement, and other state mandates, and whereas districts are already being measured by rigorous accountability measures, including MCAS tests. As such, any proposed changes should improve outcomes for students and educators, as opposed to serving as punitive measures for sanctions. And whereas there's no perfect one-size-fits-all formula to address 351 diverse cities and towns, and none of the major reform bills currently filed in the legislature include a commitment to adequate minimum aid increases each year, an annual minimum aid increase of at least $100 per student would avoid cuts to existing school programs. And whereas there are 2 pending initiatives for litigation to address education finance reform, which would use taxpayer money and take years to conclude, And a legislated approach could render a lawsuit moot by finding a solution with input from all stakeholders and be implemented immediately. Therefore, be it resolved that Hingham School Committee urges the legislature to approve an Education Finance Reform Act in 2019, the needs in all districts. Thank you.
And some people will not like them. I don't mean necessarily even in this room, but a number of years ago with a prior governor, I was on a task force for education finance reform. And we were looking at it much more broadly than simply in terms of changing the formula, which certainly does need to be changed. There's no doubt that there are things in the formula that haven't kept up to date with times, that were never adequate, that perhaps aren't relatively addressing the priorities that need to be addressed, which vary from one community to the next. So I'm glad to see that this is focusing on finance reform, not simply foundation, even though I believe there are changes we could make there. Because back then, and this goes back a number of years, but part of the reason that we had a hard time, I was on a big committee, and the committee that I was on was about long-term funding for education, whereas the more recent foundation thing is change it now and get it done, and there was never enough money to do that, and that's why it doesn't get done. Not that people don't believe in it, there's not enough money to do that. But what we did find out on that very large committee that I was on, that had a combination of people from schools, but also people from the world of finance, professors that teach finance and that are the ones that put together the estimates of how much all of these things can cost over time, is that the money that had been appropriated in recent years to that time, much of it had gone to schools that needed money. There's no question they needed money. But much of the money they had received that was new money in recent years had gone in the communities that received a lot of it, mainly to the growth in the costs of special education and in teacher salaries. And so there's a lot of emotion around that, because those of us who didn't get so much of that money would say, I don't mind appropriating more money to give kids an education, but you know, what do we have in place that gives us a sense of where the money would go? If we simply give everybody some additional dollars so that there's a more equitable balance of resource from one community to the next, how do we know it's going to get there as opposed to going somewhere else? And shouldn't any Finance Reform Act, in the broader sense of finance, have a component of it that has a way of measuring where extra dollars really are going? And certainly the people that work in those districts now aren't the people that worked there when the decisions were made about where the prior new dollars went. But when they go into things that are somewhat beyond control, beyond practical control, they aren't ever going to go anywhere unless, with the new money that's coming, there's some sense of direction as to where it needs to go and some way of measuring that. And that's something I've always felt very strongly about, and the focus on just foundation and the focus on just dollars as part of any finance reform package are at least as important as how many dollars everybody should get. And that's what the funding, anyway, the funding aspect of the focus on changing the foundation formula is trying to address. There's no question any of these good things need money. And there's also not a question without raising taxes, which our state doesn't like to do. I don't know any states that like to do that. There is not enough current revenue, sources of revenue, kind of like we sometimes talk about when we're talking about budget here. It's not just a matter of restraint. It's not just a matter of targeting some things that are really, really priorities in one year and other things in other years. That needs to be there. But we've talked many times about the fact there needs to be more revenue, and that's more true even at the state level.
Can I just ask a question? When I see the last sentence, 2019, is that referring to the state's FY19, which is the budget comes out July 1? In other words, if today is May 20th, do we have enough time to have this be accomplished in 2019?
If they're aiming to have a decision in June or July, I mean, that's what they say.
Past their deadline. Right. They were initially hoping to have something, was it March or April, and they missed that deadline, so.
So you think there's enough time by having 2019 there rather than FY 220, 2020?
Well, we're working on the 220 budget
Yeah.
now.
Right. But we are asking them to pass the Education Reform Act this fiscal year.
Right.
Ideally. So I think that's what we're.
And the sense is there's enough time to do that?
I mean, if they have run out of time,
Okay.
that is something that they should be held
Maybe
accountable
enough
for,
time to-
because they've had plenty of
There
time.
may be enough time to pass it.
Right.
There
Between
isn't
active,
enough
right.
time to realize
Right.
it in terms of added revenue.
Would you rather it say fiscal year?
No, I don't want to build in an out.
Right. So you're saying if it's done this year, right. Right. And understanding your point, Dr. Gallo, I think that is the one thing that I do like about this amended proposal is it is very specific about about where a lot of these funds would go, right? Adjusting for inflation, higher allowances for economically disadvantaged students, special education, English language learners, school safety. So it does give a little more texture and context about where these funds should be spent.
On the other hand, it also specifies that a number about, $100 a student to everyone, and that sort of keeps if it's tilted, it's going to be tilted now in the other direction.
Right, right. I mean, and your point about revenue is well taken as well, right? I mean, that is always the question, right? But I think that's also another piece of right, that's part of being a legislator is you also have to figure that out, right? You have a budget need. You can't just keep saying to districts, whether it's schools or any other town or city departments, well, there's just no more money. Well, if these things have to be done, and many of them are mandated to be done, then we have to figure out a way to pay for them. So that's why we elect folks to do that. But to your point, you're right, that it is a revenue issue as much as it is an expense issue. All right, well, with all those comments, what are folks thinking? Are we wanting
It's a
to
good idea. I
vote
just wrote
tonight?
myself a note that on July 1st, if it hasn't passed, then we refile. That'll be the first act of business for the July meeting.
To make another, yeah, okay. I can go with that. All right, so folks, do you want to make a motion? I would love you to make a motion.
Good job.
I make a motion to approve the resolution presented for vote as it reads.
Second. Carrie, second, thank you. Further discussion? No? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? All right, great. That passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, Libby, is the Cherish Act in here too? Or did we leave the Cherish Act in here?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see it for some reason, but that is my,
Which one?
is it on the next? Why can't I find it?
I thought it was in there. I didn't see it. Oh, here. I can read that one too.
Sorry, is
We
it in
didn't
there?
make any changes to it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
Oh,
That's just
okay.
the
Do- no,
attachments.
I think that's the same one.
Oh, yeah, so it's not in there.
Sorry, it's not in the packet. Okay.
It was in the last
It was in
time.
our previous packet.
Yeah.
Do
And we didn't
you-
make any changes to it.
Okay. Do folks want to vote on the Cherish Act or discuss the Cherish Act too?
I can bring up the last one.
Okay. Do you mind? That would be great. Thank you. And Libby, do you have it available to read? Okay.
Yes.
So the Cherish Act is relating to funding higher education, so not necessarily apropos to public schools, but many school committee members are taking a stand on this as well, because we do often send our public school students to public universities and colleges. So we haven't made any changes to that one, so Libby, you want to read that? And
Okay.
we'll try to.
Resolution in support of the Cherish Act to increase funding for public higher education in Massachusetts. Whereas a public education that is available to all students from pre-kindergarten through higher education is foundational to our democracy. And whereas all of our students, no matter where they live or study, deserve access to an affordable public college or university that prepares them for fulfilling careers and to be contributing members of their communities. And whereas the Commonwealth's per-student funding for public higher education has declined by 1/3 since 2001, when inflation is taken into account. And whereas a student debt for public higher education has reached staggering levels, impoverishing students and families and preventing many from completing their degree programs. And whereas faculty and staff in community colleges, state universities, and the University of Massachusetts system are experiencing the elimination of programs, service cuts, and increased use of part-time faculty and staff. And whereas the Higher Education Finance Commission found in 2014 that our public colleges and universities are underfunded by more than $50 million a year. And whereas the vast majority of students who attend our public colleges and universities live and work in Massachusetts after they graduate, contributing their knowledge and skills to our economy and our communities. Therefore, be it resolved that the Hingham School Committee supports the boards of trustees at Massachusetts public colleges and universities in urging the legislature to approve the Cherish Act, a bill that would, over 5 years, restore state per-student spending on public higher education to the inflation-adjusted levels achieved in fiscal year 2001.
Motion?
I'll make a motion
Thank you.
to pass the resolution in support of the Cherish Act.
All right. Second? Carrie, thank you. Any discussion? Ed, are you good?
I'm thinking.
Okay. Do you want to, are you ready to vote, or do you want to
Oh, sure.
discuss? Okay. All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? No? All right, that passes unanimously as well. Thank you. All right, 7.3, to receive subcommittee and liaison assignments for 2019-2020. I took everyone's request into consideration and came up with the following subcommittee assignments and liaisons. You guys, folks have them in your package. Do you have any, is everybody happy with them? I hope I didn't miss anything. All right. We will post these, I won't read them all. We'll post them on the website. So they'll be on the website to be available, unless anyone's interested in any particular assignments. All right, we'll put them up on the website.
And to be effective immediately?
Effective immediately, yes. All right, great. All right, 7.4, to receive recommended dates for the school committee meetings during July and August. We are proposing one meeting in July and one meeting in August. The proposed dates that work for The administration and the incoming administration are July 22nd and August 12th. Are those dates good for everybody? Understand here now? Yeah?
The 12th would be tough for me.
Okay.
August 12th.
August 12th, all right. Are you out of town, or are you, it doesn't, I mean, you don't need to tell me why you're not, why it's not a good day. I just think August was a little tough.
Should I tell you the truth, or should I make up a
You don't
story?
have to tell me anything. You don't need to share. The only reason for August 12th was, I think there's some vacations in there for the administration, and then we start running into back to school already. Haven't even ended this school year. We're already talking back to school. That starts sort of the August 23rd-ish, right? And
That's
right.
the last week in August.
Yes, and schools, Labor Day's early again this year, so we can, as I always say, there's a reason that there's 7 of us here, because there only need to be 4 of us to have a meeting. So if you don't mind, we'll go with those 2 dates. Okay, so we're good with those dates.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you. All right. All right, and now we have a few field trips to approve. 7.5, or, sorry, not to approve, but to receive notification of. 7.5, to receive notification of the overnight field trip of grade 10 to 12 art and music students to Berlin and Prague, April 16th through April 23rd. And Dr. Gallo, we are just receiving notification of these, correct? We are not?
Well, no, that's not exactly true. There have been a couple that have been hanging around a bit
Okay.
because of agendas being crowded. But when we're looking at trips to, particularly to Europe, and trips that require some fundraising,
Yes.
the people advising the trips want to get that information out about the trip, give kids, parents an opportunity to raise money and
Right.
all of that. So we put on anything that we have.
Okay.
Do they need to vote on it?
But we're
though,
not
is the
voting on
question.
them.
Do they need to vote on it, or are they just acknowledging that it's happening?
No, they can ask
We're just acknowledging that it's
questions
happening.
and,
Okay. So, does anyone have any questions on that particular field trip? The information is in your packets. No? Okay, all right. So, Berlin and Prague for the grade 10 to 12 art. That's excellent. All right, 7.6, to receive notification of the overnight field trip of grade 9 through 12 music students to Los Angeles, February 26th through March 1st. Any questions on that one? All right. 7.7, to receive notification of the overnight field trip of grade 9 to 12 French and Spanish students to Paris, Barcelona, and Madrid, April 16th, 2020 through April 25th. Any questions on that trip? All right. 7.8, to receive notification of the overnight field trip of grade 4 PRS students to Camp Wingate, Kirkland, and Yarmouthport from September 25th, 2019 through September 27, 2019. It's the annual Cape Cod trip. Everybody good with that? All right. To receive notification, oh, sorry, that's it for field trips. All right. So item 7.9, we have, and 7.9 through 7.12, we have some appointments and retirements and resignations. So 7.9, to receive the notification of the appointments of Megan Corey and Colleen Quinn, food service technicians, and Jeff Southworth, custodian at PRS and Hingham Middle School. 7.1, to receive notification of some retirements. Teacher Pamela Amster at East School, Marcia Appel at Foster School, Linda Corsone at South School, and Maria Swerbalis at Hingham Middle School, all effective on June 30th. So we wish them a wonderful retirement and thank them for all their years for Hingham Public Schools. 7.11, to receive the notification of the retirement of Joan O'Brien, beloved administrative assistant at Hingham Middle School, effective July 19th. So we will certainly miss seeing Joan's smiling face at the middle school. And then I was thinking if I didn't read this, maybe it wouldn't happen, but 7.14 is to receive the notification of the resignation of Aisha Obang, financial assistant to Director of Business and Support Services, She will be very much missed, particularly by John, I'm sure. No, Aisha is great, but we do wish her the best of luck. As well as Andrea Atkins, Administrative Assistant at Central Office. I believe Dr. Gallo mentioned she's moving. And Eric Silva, District Maintenance Custodian, also resigning as of April 5th. So all those folks will be leaving the district, but we thank them for their hard work and all their contributions to the district over the last couple of years. Item 8 is other items not reasonably known 48 hours in advance of the meeting.
So just want to make a quick comment.
Go ahead.
Dr. Gallo, just on the 48 hours, just want to make a quick comment that, I appreciate, the work of every single person, staff, teachers, and everyone else. And most importantly, Aisha being here at the central office, bringing some diversity to the office. I can appreciate that, being of a diverse background. During the campaign, individuals did bring to my attention that they would like to see more consideration in hiring more diverse teachers and staff. With Aisha not being here now, I would actually respectfully ask that we, as we are in the process of hiring someone looking to also bring more diversity to the central office. That's my personal comments. Thank you.
Any other items under 48 hours from the committee? No? Dr. Gallo or Jamie or John, do you have any 48 hours? No? Okay.
Are we going to set a time for Friday for the?
Yes.
Yes.
You will.
We don't have to do it right
No.
now.
Nope, that's okay. I was
There's
actually
not
just going to
to
bring
get
it up under the subcommittee and project reports. So item 9 is subcommittee and project reports. We are scheduling a salary negotiation subcommittee meeting on Friday this week.
4:30.
4:30. Does that work for you, Dr. Gallo? Nothing better on the Friday of a long weekend than a salary and negotiation subcommittee meeting at 4:30. All right. Done. All right, so 4:30 it is. All right. I think many of the subcommittees were wrapping up. The old subcommittees were wrapped up, but if people have updates, yes.
I do.
Yes, all right. What do we got?
Several. If you all look in your package, the second screen in are what are known as these warrants. And the background to these is, if you're wondering, I go in usually on Fridays, and Aisha, as a matter of fact, would give me that week's payables, and that's what these are. Now, you'll notice this week that there are 6 invoices with my comments. Each one of these invoices has a comment sheet, which I decided to just highlight some of the things that, frankly, we're paying. I just think it's, if I'm going to do it, I'd like to share that information with you. And a segue from one of the invoices, as I was reading it, was a $40-something thousand paving expense at South Elementary. So putting one together, in fact, I'm happy to report that the architectural access citation that we received at South Elementary has been satisfied. So that's finished. And I picked up on it on one of these warrants. The question that was raised at the last meeting about the scoreboard for the varsity softball field, that process has already begun. As I said last time, and I'll say it again, the information, definitive information and updates will come through long-range planning, and we've had a transition in long-range planning, and I'm going to make sure that the other people on the committee are up to speed on this. And in terms of the fields, which a question was raised on social media, again, I think the more appropriate place would be to do this through a long-range planning subcommittee definitive report. But in a nutshell, I'm happy with the way things have been going. High school, the crabgrass control, weed control, and fertilizer were all done. Lime and overseeding was done last fall, right down the field. So rather than bore you with things that interest me. We'll do this through long-range planning as a definitive report. And I just want to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Nope, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other subcommittee reports or liaison reports? No? Oh,
No.
You good?
We are in the process of scheduling our first salary negotiations. Long-range planning.
Okay.
Subcommittee
And
meeting, so
salary
it should happen within a week.
Okay.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I'm done.
So I have an HEF meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
And then I did have the middle school council meeting today.
Okay.
Oh, that's right.
And the Chromebook survey has been finalized, so that's going to go out to the parents soon, asking them just for a few questions about their kids' Chromebooks.
Okay.
And Ms. Principal Smith has started working on the school improvement plan, and he had a draft for us to look at with the 4 goals. And so it looks like that's going to be able to be further fleshed out
Okay. Great.
going forward.
Awesome. Thank you. Speaking of school councils and school liaisons, can everyone just reach out to their school principal and maybe the school secretary to just let them know that your assignment for next year, so that they can put you on the list for meetings and maybe on their email distribution list? And then Ness, you might want to, there's some guidance on the DESE website about the role of school councils and who's on it and what the makeup is and whatnot, so maybe take a look at that, and that's helpful to understand your role as a school committee member, as a liaison, not a member of the school council.
Brad, Libby, you mentioned that you went to the school council. I went to PRS's council today. I almost forgot.
Oh.
And just another reach out to the community. This is the 50th anniversary of Plymouth River, so if you have some memorabilia, contact the school.
I channeled
And
my-
interestingly, Dr. Gallo, to you, they found Roger has a website, in terms of former principal, and living in one of the Carolinas. So the plan is to try to contact him. That'd be interesting. Yeah.
All right. Excellent.
And I would like to schedule a community outreach meeting as soon as possible. If you guys are okay with that?
Yeah. That sounds good.
I'll just reach out to you via
Okay.
email.
All right.
Okay.
Perfect, thanks. There is a CPAC meeting on Wednesday night, but I cannot make it. I have a work event. You'll be there? All right, do you mind? Sorry, I know you are, sometimes there's a parent, so. All right, and then you can fill us in afterwards. All right.
And I don't know that, usually by this time, we have received a packet for you folks about graduation and stuff. I don't know that. Unless it went to you directly.
From, about the high school
Yeah.
graduation. So I did ask everyone, Ness, I'm not sure if you were here yet, if you are planning to attend graduation, to let Jane Skinner at the high school know. And it is Saturday, June 1st at 10 a.m. this year. There was a request that if it is inclement, if you're planning to go, but then it's inclement weather and we wind up being inside, to consider not going, to save more room for family members, because it's very tight. So make sure Jane knows whether or not you're going to be there, so she can have appropriate seats.
And also, tomorrow evening is the Junior Awards Assembly, I believe.
Okay.
And Wednesday is the Senior Athletic Awards.
Yep.
And next Tuesday are the Senior Awards, Academic Awards, Scholarships, that
Yep.
kind of thing. And Thursday is the prom, and
Saturday graduation.
this coming Wednesday is the, what do we call it, the picnic?
Yep, tomorrow.
Receipt of
Or this Wednesday.
yearbooks and so on, which is out here.
Right. Good day. Yes. All right. Thank you for those reminders. we have next on the agenda to adjourn to executive session. Do we need that?
Anything that I would have suggested covering, now that we have the meeting for the subcommittee, we could do it in that order. And then the things that we're talking about, there would have to be some vote that comes up at a subsequent
Meeting anyway.
meeting when everybody would be present. So it's really up to you
Okay.
whether you want to hear, or everybody wants to
Right.
hear what we're going to talk about at the
Okay, all right. So, we have options tonight. So, option one is to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session for the purpose of reviewing non-union administrative contracts, the public discussion of which may be detrimental to the committee's bargaining position and to act as appropriate, or just adjourn for the evening. So I don't think we really have an update because we're going to meet, the subcommittee will meet on Friday. So it's up to the committee. Choices. Adjourn to executive or?
Now, we wouldn't be in a position to discuss the result of the Friday
Right.
meeting. So it would only be talking about what I plan to work with Liza about for the agenda.
Right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn for the
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you.